All right, let's do a status check real quick. Saints are 2-6. We have zero elite players. We have zero players on the team as of right now who would be highly coveted by other teams. I think Alante's played well. I think Marshawn has played well. I think AK has played well. Um, I think both tackles have been fine for the most part. Pretty good to really good in some games, but overall just fine. No issues. There's not one guy on this roster where like fans of another team, especially like a contender, would be like, oh, I would love to have him. Like I think some teams would say that about Chris Olave. Like the Chiefs would love to have Chris Olave. But that's just because the Chiefs are loaded across the board and you have the best quarterback in the league. So a really good wide receiver who's not dominant, but who's an incredible route runner and has legit deep speed, like, oh, they'd love to have him. But like they're not like, oh my god, we gotta have him. Like there's not that guy on the roster. You have the worst coach in the league. You have probably the second worst GM in the league. Like Ballard's the worst. Like he's god tier awful. I don't think you can make an empirical argument other than Ballard. Anybody is worse than Mickey. Like there might be a four-way tie for second worst GM. I'm not totally sure. That scenario doesn't exist, but like he's one of the worst GMs in the league and has been for a long time. Sean Payton and Drew Brees hit a lot, and that just becomes more obvious every day that goes by. But like, really, where do we stand? You're 2-6. You don't have a great team. You have a lot of good pieces. But here's the problem with having good pieces. If you don't have good coaching or even great coaching, and you don't have an upper level quarterback, like a guy who's actually a plus player, which Derek Carr has never been a single year in his career, by the way, like a guy who actually elevates things around him, you're going to look like one of the worst teams in the league. Now, a good coach can take a bunch of good players. Like it's not a terrible roster, but it doesn't have studs, stars, dogs. Pick your superlative. It doesn't have those guys to elevate the players around them. It doesn't have the culture to do that, and it doesn't have the coaching or leadership to do that. Leadership in this specific case, meaning the quarterback position. And so you end up with is a 6-game losing streak. What you end up with is a flat-out pathetic performance against the Chargers. What you end up with is a absolute second half quit job against the Denver Broncos. And the only reason Denver didn't score 50 is because Bo Nix is 2 buckets of butt at quarterback. Like, that's where you are. So I guess the real question is, where do we go from here? Here's what I'd like to see. And I'm not happy saying this. After week 2, we were all up in the clouds. We're going to the Super Bowl, man. Whew, did we come back to earth fast? Everything for this point going forward in the season needs to be about evaluation. Like, as far as I'm concerned, even a tiny bit competent team, the evaluation on the head coach is done. He's got one of the worst records from any coach in NFL history that has coached the number of games that he has coached. He is historically awful. So, personally, I would cut Derek Carr with a June 1 designation going into the next season, largely just because you're not playing for anything, and rostering and starting a bucket of mid at best quarterback who's had leadership issues his whole career doesn't really help your roster. We're now in evaluation mode. You should be evaluating all the young guys. I want to see Ford play. I want to see every young guy on the field. Start Jake Haener against the Panthers. They're not going to do this, but this is what they should do. Start Jake Haener. Let's see Jake get a couple of starts. Spencer has the higher upside. Maybe Jake has the higher floor. Like, let's see. Let's find out. We can analyze who played against better defenses and all that later. Like, that's fine. Let's find out. Let's see what they have. Let's play the young guys. This should be about evaluation because you're going to have a lot of tough decisions going into next year. And the reality is the Saints are a bad team. So accept that you're a bad team, cut as much of the dead weight you can, play as many young guys as you can, go get a good coach, tell him you're going to have 3 years to build the roster, get the best pick you can get, and you'd be shocked with a little bit of luck, a huge part of that being the right coach getting hired, how quickly you can turn some of this around. But in 3 years, Dennis Allen has accomplished one thing and one thing only. He has obliterated everything Sean Payton and Drew Brees built. You were handed a roster that was a 500 team that was devastated not only by injuries, but by literal natural disasters and a pandemic, and have yet to exceed the standard achieved by a team that started Trevor Siemian for like 5 games. That's where you are. That's how bad we are. I'm not happy. I'd like to see them do better. But right now, Bo Nix ain't the only bucket of butt in the NFL. The Saints are a bucket and a half with a freaking Coke Zero on the side. Zero stands for Dennis Allen's ability to coach. Not a happy day, but let's see how the rest of the season goes, I guess.